Final chat with Russell Norman, co-leader of the Greens before the election this Saturday. Russell Norman, good morning to you.
Good morning, Wemo.
Good morning. Now let's first up let's talk about some possibilities this Saturday and who the Greens could and couldn't work with. We've heard that it's extremely unlikely that you could form a coalition agreement with National. But in the very unlikely chance, what are the conditions in which you could?
Well, what we've done over the last 3 years is we've worked with them on a memorandum of understanding. So we've been voting against on confidence and supply, but we got progress. That contaminated site that they've just found in Coromandel, that's as a result of the work that the Greens initiated with National about identifying contaminated sites. So that's the home insulation scheme and the cycle network and all of that. And so that's the most likely outcome if there is a national-led government, which looks very likely, obviously, based on the polls. That's the most likely the way that we'd work with them. And we've said that in terms of going into formal coalition, given that the differences are so big, it is hard to see how we could go into formal coalition with them, with differences on policy, that is.
Okay, and let's look at those differences in policy. So like asset sales, the fact that they're selling assets, you couldn't. That would be one that you would not go into coalition with. With that being a policy.
Yeah, that's right. There's no way the Greens can support asset sales.
Okay.
And in fact, we have a different vision to Labor. Labor just wants to have them sit there as passive things. We want to actually make them active and part of an export sector in clean energy technology. But you can only do that by keeping them in public ownership and then using that to partner with the private sector rather than flogging them off. So if we were talking to National, obviously keeping the assets in public ownership would be a top priority for the Greens.
Based on current polling, let's say you did come in at around about 12-13% on Saturday.
Oh, come on, what about 15?
Well, let's just say around about that. You're bringing in a lot more MPs. Wouldn't you be looking for a better memorandum of understanding, a few more concessions from National?
We would. Obviously every vote for the Greens is effective because we get change, because we work with National and we'd work with Labor, obviously. We'd be looking at more and extending the existing MOU if that were possible. That might be in the areas around cleaning up rivers and lakes where there's some differences and some common ground. It could be in some areas around giving more educational opportunities for beneficiaries because National cut back on that and we're keen to extend it. Or it could be in the green jobs area if National want to talk more about that, particularly the home insulation scheme, extending that to another 200,000 homes, and potentially also riparian fencing and planting to clean up rivers. Yeah.
Would there be any concern, though, that, because let's face it, let's say if National get in, they will be extremely unpopular in 3 years. The economy will be further down the toilet, the world economy and everything else. There'll be more unemployment, the rivers will be more polluted, all of that stuff. And John Key will probably have taken off. He'd probably be finished by the end of next year. And we'll have the most unpopular Prime Minister ever seen in New Zealand in 3 years' time. Don't you think that Labor will be, the Greens will be tarred with that brush?
Well, it's always a risk, but our job is to get good green change, and I think people who vote for the Greens know that. And so whatever votes we get, we leverage them to maximise good green change. And if that means talking with National, if that's what the democratic process has delivered a National-led government, then you've got to respect that. Because find a way to work with them.
But if you look at the past 3 years, it's been reasonably easy to be in that memorandum of understanding, because National haven't put out the extreme policies that they want to do in the next 3 years. So it's going to be even more difficult to kind of to be a little bit more quiet. You're going to have to really come out quite hard against some of these things, like the irrigation in Canterbury. You're going to have to be fairly firm on them. It's going to be hard to be friends, as it were.
Yeah, and as part of the negotiations around any extension of the memorandum of understanding between the Greens and National, we would be pushing very hard to stop the asset sales. We'd be pushing very hard to stop a massive increase in irrigation. So we would be talking to National about stopping some of their more stupid projects, which they don't have public support for. The public don't support the privatisation of the state assets. And so the Greens would be in a position where we could put pressure on National around that, probably better than any other party.
Okay, let's look at an issue that I don't think has been discussed at all that much in this election. That's immigration. News this morning that the exodus to Australia is near record levels. In fact, I think there's more people leaving than arriving at the moment. Where do the Greens sit on immigration? I mean, I know obviously you want to stop the flow of people out of the country, but what about the types of people and the quality of immigrants into New Zealand? Where do you stand on that?
Well, we've taken a pretty firm stand against, New Zealand First type approaches, which is, they've obviously run very anti-Asian, anti-Muslim campaigns in the past, and we totally reject that. It's got to be a non-discriminatory immigration policy. We've also been very supportive of refugees, and, when you look, for example, at the Tampa kids, heaps of them have gone on to make a huge contribution to New Zealand. So, we think refugees have an important, and us accepting refugees is important. But really, the key issue around this story today about, this is that we've got net loss of people for the first time since 2001.
Yeah.
The key story is around a plan for jobs, well-paid jobs, and National don't have one. The Greens have put forward a Green Jobs plan, and that's the aim of that is to build on our strategic advantages about clean and green and clean technology, which is a growing sector internationally.
How many people do you think can live in New Zealand?
Well, Ministry for the Environment got some work done on this question, and they suggested 5 million. Obviously, nobody really knows. But, we can't have endless population growth either, and that's not just in New Zealand, that's globally. So we do need to turn the population growth around. There's some good signs around that. So that, we have seen internationally there's some positives, but, we've still got a bit of way to go because, the more people we have and the more intensive our lifestyles in terms of the impact on the planet, then the bigger overall environmental impact. Because
let's say going forward, obviously, people will stop going to Australia at some point. Something bad will happen over there. And we're going to come back to the immigration issue, aren't we? And, would you like to see some kind of cap? What would that look like in the future?
Yeah, given that we've just had net outflow of people, we just don't, it's not really a big challenge for New Zealand right now. You'd have to say at this particular point in time. So
you're saying cross that bridge when we come to it?
Well, what our policy around population is that we should develop we should look further at the issue of what is the carrying capacity in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And there has been a bit of work done about that. We're not saying it's right, but there has been a bit of work done about it. But the real, for us right now, that isn't really the top problem we've got when we've got so many people leaving our country.
Very good point. Well, exciting day on Saturday. Best of luck to you and the rest of the Greens, and we look forward to chatting after the election.
Yeah, thank you. And make sure people get on the roll and get out to vote on Saturday.
That's the important thing. At least everyone should vote. Thanks very much, Russell. Cheers.
Okay, cheers, mate.
Russell Norman, co-leader of the Greens, there with us.